Okay, welcome to the first episode of Concerned Constituency. We are happy to be here. We are your host. I am Nico.
And I am Flynn.
So we've been talking about doing this for a while, and there was a little bit of a debate with whether we were going to do it or whether we should do it. And we just kind of decided that we were going to do it.
Yeah, full steam ahead.
Yeah. So, just to be clear, we are not experts in anything we talk about. We are just nerds, who are fascinated in this subject. My dad always said that politics was his favorite sport, and I thought that was it's appropriate. Because politics is like a sport. You know, I mean, there's strategy, there's playing fields, there's teams. Except this actually matters. So to start, few things have been dominating the news recently. One, the Breonna Taylor verdict came, and it was definitely not satisfactory.
Certainly not justice.
Yeah.
Certainly not the justice for Breonna Taylor that everybody's been fighting for in the streets.
No. So Brett Hankison, is that how you pronounce it? Was indicted for wanton endangerment for firing into a neighboring apartment. The other two were not held accountable. So I've been seeing this thing online that a lot of people are saying, and I think it speaks volumes, and it says that he was charged for the bullets that missed.
That's a quote that I've seen going around either on signs, on tweets, whatever, that I think is particularly poignant. And I mean, you know, when we talk about this and when we call for justice for Breonna Taylor, we do it knowing that true justice is kind of unattainable in a case like this because Breonna's dead. She was murdered.
Right.
So true justice would be Breonna Taylor being alive and continuing her life. And obviously that is not happening because of the actions of the police, of these three officers, Brett Hankison, Jonathan Mattingly, Miles Cosgrove. But what we're really asking for when we call for justice is accountability. We want the system to sort of look at this case and say, a woman is dead, was shot dead in her apartment, that certainly shouldn't have been, and it was wrong, and our decision is going to reflect that it's wrong. And basically what we have in this verdict is the criminal justice system saying, no, it wasn't wrong. You know, not accounting for the fact that there was no charges that had to do with the death of Breonna Taylor. It's just the one endangerment for the neighboring apartment. So in the eyes of the criminal justice system, or at least as this case was decided, there are no consequences for these officers.
And there usually, it seems like there usually isn't.
Yes.
And so obviously there was demonstrations in Louisville to protest this, and not just Louisville, all over the world. So the thing that I find the most interesting is that there are a lot more guns at these protests. I think 2 officers were shot in Louisville. You know, obviously I can't condone that.
And you know, that's coming off the back of these. We see, you know, roving militias and street gangs, and it's hard to know what the best step forward is, because if you have Boogaloo Boys and Proud Boys and all these people carrying guns, and you have somebody like Kyle Rittenhouse killing protesters, the question becomes, what do you do? Because obviously when we're protesting for justice and accountability for somebody who died, we don't want more people to die or come close to death. That's not any kind of solution.
An eye for an eye isn't the goal here.
And that's not in any way trying to police how people are fronting their venting their frustrations at all, but more so just, a common idea of people shouldn't get shot.
Right.
That's an opinion I have that I don't think is going to change. I don't think people should get shot. But again, like it's hard to know what are you supposed to do as a demonstrator when you have these roving gangs coming around. You have police. There was a Twitter thread that I think is now in the thousands of, early thousand of videos of police brutality from these demonstrations against police brutality. Isn't that ironic? But, police kind of doubling down, showing up with riot gear, showing up with all of these things, and, just making the situation exponentially worse.
Yeah.
And so it's tough because the right to peaceably assemble is enumerated in the Constitution. And,
right.
We're going to talk about a couple rights enumerated in the Constitution in this episode, but a protest for justice for somebody murdered by police is political speech in a public forum, which should be the most protected form of free speech, and that's not what we're seeing. And so, I think everything that's happened thus far is a travesty.
Right.
And I can only hope that, Democrats in power begin to act swiftly in meaningful ways that kind of change the status quo. Because we knew, days before the decision was announced, the city of Louisville, Kentucky was placed in a state of emergency. So we already knew what was coming, because we're not going to have a state of emergency if these officers are getting held accountable, because that would sort of, again, not justice, but it may placate people somewhat if there were any kind of consequences, but they're not. So, and when we talk about officers being shot, I think it honestly, there's a lot of ways to talk about it, but I think one of the most important ways to frame it is people that wouldn't be shot had police officers not murdered someone in the first place, and then after they murdered someone had been held accountable for it. Like you have all the kind of rafts in the world to get out of this, and you'd rather see it's a failure to see more people shot as a result when you could have just either not had cops murdered or held cops accountable for a murder. So,
and like anyone in the right mind would agree that, you may get pissed off at cops. I don't want to see a cop that didn't really have anything to do with this shot and killed. I mean, that's just not the way I think we need to move in society.
Yeah.
But that being said, while I don't condone that, it is what do you expect when, like you said, when there is no accountability?
Yeah.
This is happening over and over again. I know people like to argue about statistics, but I mean, the statistics are that black men are more likely to be shot by police. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that not everyone is shot by police of every race, but black men are more likely to be shot and killed by police.
And if you wanna bring up a white person shot by police as a gotcha moment, all you're doing is showing more people being affected by police brutality.
Right.
And
which I think is, I don't want to say it's the larger issue, but I think, obviously the race issue is very apparent, but the really big issue, I think, is just policing in general.
Yeah.
Where
power.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Power. A cop's first move when he feels threatened shouldn't be to kill the guy.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be to unload 7 bullets into a guy's back. That's the system. Mm-hmm. No knock warrants.
Right.
That is, it's a horrible policy.
Mm-hmm.
People like to say, well, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend shot first. He shot first because someone broke into his house unannounced.
And most, from everything I've read, most neighbors did not hear police announce themselves,
No.
and her boyfriend also said they did not announce themselves, and I find it a little bit ironic that the people who are constantly defending gun ownership by saying if somebody comes to my door and tries to enter my house uninvited, I'm going to shoot at them.
Right.
Can, turn around and be like, oh, well, they tried to come into his house unannounced, but he shouldn't have shot at them. And I think just to like wrap this topic up, if you are a supporter of police, you need to be calling for these things. You need to be calling for ending qualified immunity. You need to be calling for busting up police unions, and you need to be calling for defunding, for reallocation of funds.
Right.
Because I gotta be real with you, if you're not calling them and you're supporting police, all you're going to see is this continue to happen, and more
Right.
and more and more people become in favor of complete abolition of police.
Right.
And that's not the topic of this episode. That's not what we're going to discuss, abolition of police. I'm just saying that, if you don't get on board with this, I mean, this is the compromise. Right. Defunding and ending qualified immunity and busting up police unions, that is the compromise. Right. So balls in your court, I guess is all we have to say about that. And I'm sure this will continue to develop. I mean, these, the protests that were really sparked by kind of the trio of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor in some of the most prominent American cities have never stopped.
Right.
They've been consistently every night. So I'm sure that there will be more to talk about with this, and hopefully Democrats can, really actually begin to lead, because
Right.
Republicans are not going to lead on this issue. So
No.
hopefully Democrats can, introduce real policy proposal at the federal, state, and local levels. This is a local issue too. And another thing we want to talk about before we get into the main topic of this episode, sort of many main topics that all kind of connect together, is once again, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, has not committed to a peaceful transfer of power. You never know what to make of Trump comments because his brain is fried and he, will just say whatever's the first thing that comes to his mind.
Right.
But he was asked by reporter Brian Karam whether he would commit to a peaceful transfer of power, and he responded to that question with, "We're going to have to see what happens," which is the wrong answer. There's a right answer to that question, and that is not it.
Yeah.
And he added, "You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster." He's talking, of course, about votes, about votes in the 2020 presidential election. Get rid of the ballots, and you'll have a very peaceful... There won't be a transfer, frankly. There will be a continuation.
Yeah.
Of course, that's his way of saying, if you get rid of the votes that aren't for me, I will clearly win and then can stay in office. That's the Trump speak translation. But this is obviously very worrisome. President Trump is fairly undemocratic.
Yeah.
He doesn't have much appreciation of democracy, of the democratic process, of what the majority of the American people would want. He admires dictators and strongmen more than democratically elected leaders. So this isn't too surprising. No. And, again, I think that this is just something where we got to kind of be concerned about this, but also hope that, this is not the beginnings of a coup. We've seen Trump, attempt multiple times at multiple stages throughout this election process to cheat because he knows that's really the only way he can win at this point. Right. If polling is correct in any way. So, it's weird to look at somebody who is, by all accounts, a fascist and hear him say fascist things and say, take a wait and see approach. But there's so much going on right now that this is just kind of, Trump will say anything that comes to his mind. So we need to frame it as we're going to remove him and not he's going to refuse to leave. Right.
So I think what's the most concerning, at least to me, is that we know that this election is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
We know he's already going to claim victory. Mm-hmm. The scariest thing to me, and I think this is something that we need to educate everyone on, is that we're not going to get the results on election night. It might be election week. It might be election month. Mm-hmm. So I just don't. There's,
like this situation, right? Like not knowing exactly who won the election,
right,
is not like on election night, as you're mentioning, is not unprecedented. We had a knockdown, drag out fight in Bush v. Gore, and that was in 2000. And I get that things go a mile a minute, and something that happened yesterday feels like ancient history. But it's the job of us when we're talking to people. It's really the job of mainstream media figures and journalists, and there's certainly a number of journalists doing a great job at this. But to frame this conversation as, look, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so you're going to have a lot of states with a lot more mail-in ballots than is normal for an election, and counting those ballots could take time, and don't expect the results on election night. And I think that if you frame it that way, and also if politicians get out the vote and encourage early voting, if you are voting by mail, if your state is only voting by mail, or if you're choosing to vote by mail, what have you, get your vote in early so that it's counted early.
Right.
I think that focusing on that is big too.
I gotta say, I know this isn't the popular opinion. So is New Jersey, is it strictly mail-in voting for New Jersey? Yeah. Okay, so we don't have a choice. But if I did have a choice, I think I would go to the polls. And I know that's my privilege as someone that's young and relatively healthy to say that, but I'm more scared of Trump than the virus. I'm just afraid that no matter what, he's going to somehow delegitimize these mail-in ballots.
Yeah. And this was the desire by drumming up all this anti-mail-in ballot.
He's been preparing for this. Right. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, and I would always prefer to go to the polling place because I like going and casting my vote, but I'm a dork like that. But I think that, again, when we're talking about this, and you led into it with might be the unpopular opinion, anything like that, right? Anything we're missing out on always has to be framed as this is Donald Trump's fault.
Yeah.
Right? We're not getting the election results on election night. Well, if Trump had acted when we needed him to and given a strong federal response to COVID, we would be. We would be voting in person. We would likely have the results on election night. So, Democrats should be ready for this because, if you're like me, you stayed up 8 hours too long waiting for no results of the Iowa caucus.
Right.
So you should already be prepped and ready for this. But, again, it's... this is Trump's fault, right? That's one of these issues where that's how it's got to be. It is Trump's fault we're not getting the results. So anytime he complains about it, well, Mr. President, you didn't act for months and months, called COVID a hoax, and now we are where we are, where we can't get back to normal, where the rest of the world is proceeding in an orderly fashion.
Right.
So,
yeah, and. I think no matter what, people are going to be out in the streets, which is scary. Like, I'm not one of these people that are like, oh, the riots are so scary, because we know that that's a very small percentage of what's actually going on. But I mean, you get Trump to delegitimize the results of the election. I mean, I don't doubt for a minute his right-wing coup is going to march out, and, you know, what do we do? Democrats are constantly talking about that we need to win big. We need to make sure that Joe Biden wins by extraordinary numbers. I personally just don't see that happening. It's
going to be a close election.
It's going to be close.
And that's just a matter of, you know, I think that Joe Biden is going to win the popular vote by 5 million.
Right.
It's just a matter of the Electoral College being what it is.
Right.
You know, Beto O'Rourke is trying in Texas. He really is. I don't know if it's there yet, but and I think that Pete Buttigieg liked to say, you know, we need to win in margins that, you know, aren't within cheating distance.
Right.
Send that clear message. But, you know, it's not an easy task to win a presidential election against an incumbent. It's not. As grotesque as President Trump is, he's got that incumbency built in, you know. So, and I think that it's a good spot to wrap this up is exactly what you're saying, in that I agree with you that the scariest part of these comments is not the idea that the military would not remove Donald Trump from office had Joe Biden won in a Democratic election. It's Donald Trump going out and saying, they stole this election from me, they stole this election from you.
Right.
Do what you will. Right.
And it's just not easy with how fucked up our voting system is in general.
Yeah.
I really encourage everyone. I think I want to talk more about this next week when we cover the debate.
Yes. Yeah.
But I really encourage everyone to watch All In, The Fight for Democracy on Amazon Prime, and it's all about voter suppression. And it's really interesting stuff, and it's happening.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this election will be decided by the Electoral College or the Supreme Court, which will lead us into our main topic.
Yeah.
So, just to add another horrible event to this shitty year, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away at 87 of pancreatic cancer. Everyone calls her a superhero, and that is the most accurate representation of her. She is an American hero, especially to women. I mean, you could list all the accomplishments she had with women. Women now don't have to have their husbands co-sign when they want a credit card, or, you know,
it's things taken for granted almost. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of my heroes. It was incredibly crushing learning of her passing. You know, I went to bed that night feeling kind of defeated, and then I woke up and said, forget all that. Ruth would be pissed off about that.
Right.
There's a moment in Hamilton. I'm sure if you're listening, you like Hamilton. Who doesn't? But there's a moment in Hamilton during the Lawrence interlude after Alexander learns through a letter from John Lawrence's father that John Lawrence had been killed in a skirmish after the war ended, and Alexander, after hearing this, stifles a cry and says, "I have so much work to do." And I think that is my definitive reaction to this news. Wishing desperately that I could spend time mourning this person, and knowing because of circumstances that can't be the case, and to get to work.
If you heard a motorcycle in the background, we apologize.
It wasn't us, I swear. So yes, Ruth passed away. She had multiple cancer bouts. You know, just one of the strongest people around. Her granddaughter came out after the news had broke and said that Justice Ginsburg's dying wish, as dictated to her, had been that she would not be replaced until a new president was installed. Mitch McConnell, being Mitch McConnell, said no. This titan of jurisprudence in America does not deserve to, even have 20 minutes before I'm going to come out and say that President Trump can have a nominee, and they'll get a floor vote.
Right.
And of course, exposing the Republican hypocrisy. Justice Scalia died, I believe, 269 days before the 2016 election.
Yeah, almost a whole year.
Mm-hmm. And Merrick Garland was not allowed to be taken seriously as a candidate, and now we're kind of rushing through this nomination process.
Yeah. So today, Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett, who, I don't want to say she was a surprising choice, because, she's very conservative. She's very Catholic.
Yeah.
And very Catholic.
Yeah. Everybody knew it was Amy Coney Barrett. Jonathan Swan of Axios, who you may remember from a very fun Donald Trump interview, where Jonathan Swan made a lot of silly faces, reported all the way back in March 2019, which feels like a century ago, that, Trump had kind of been questioned on why he didn't proceed with Amy Coney Barrett for Justice Kennedy's vacated seat. And Trump responded so charmingly that Amy Coney Barrett was being saved for Justice Ginsburg's seat. So the president was actively plotting the demise of one of our greatest Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
Amy Coney Barrett, not surprising. Not a surprising choice. We kind of knew she was the odds-on betting favorite, and it really was like no frills, no drama. It's gonna be her, and then it was her.
Yeah.
So, we'll talk a little bit about Amy Coney Barrett, and then we'll wrap up talking about the fight to come, and then after that, I'd like to dedicate some time to talk about Justice Ginsburg, because I think that is a good note to end on, because it shouldn't all be about this.
Right.
Ruth should have her day in the sun and be honored. But Amy Coney Barrett, she was already a Trump nominee, nominated to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit by Trump in 2017. I think it's important to note that she is only 48 years old. That is very young. That is, and we'll talk about this as we talk about the upcoming fight, but that's potentially 4 decades on the bench. That it's very, very young for a Supreme Court justice, 48. And some of her more concerning political views in the immediate sense are being anti-Affordable Care Act, which is not an abstract thing. No. We have a case on the Affordable Care Act coming up week after the election. So it's likely that the Roberts Court, should Amy Coney Barrett be added to it, will kill the Affordable Care Act. Because even if John Roberts voted to save it, you would still have Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh joining, assumedly, Amy Coney Barrett in that. She says what all court nominees say when it comes to Roe v. Wade, when they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade, in that she respects precedent. It's a non-answer. Yeah. Brett Kavanaugh said the same thing. Roe is settled law. That is a non-answer. Settled law is settled law until it is not settled law.
Yeah.
So it's not alarmist in any way to believe that the the new Roberts Court with Amy Coney Barrett on it would overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
And effectively make abortion illegal in the United States. And I wanted to add this before we continue talking about Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah. I've seen a lot of confusion about Roe v. Wade's essential holding. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to, like, real quick, like less than a minute, discuss that, because the Constitution as it's written, with the Bill of Rights included in this, doesn't have to enumerate specific rights for rights to still be protected by the Constitution. So it does not have to say anywhere in the United States Constitution a woman has the right to terminate a pregnancy for a woman to still have that right in the United States. So I saw a lot of people, kind of asking, like, it doesn't say anything in the Constitution about abortion, so where does that even come from anyway? Glad you asked. Roe's holding comes from the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which the court held in Griswold v. Connecticut, and then, sort of enshrined in Roe, that there is a fundamental constitutional right to privacy. And that the idea is that certain liberties that American citizens hold are so important that they cannot be infringed upon without a compelling reason, no matter how much process is given. So the right to an abortion comes from the right to privacy in the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. So just thought that was important to throw out there, right. Because the Roberts Court is sooner or later going to shred that up and throw it out the window.
Yeah.
But for the time being, that's the case. So another thing about Judge Barrett is she clerked for Scalia. Some people are actually considering her to be kind of like the heir to Scalia's seat.
Right. Taking the Constitution for its literal meaning.
Yes.
That was written 300 years ago.
Right. Strict originalist.
We all know how well that works.
Yes. Strict originalist text should be interpreted as it was written, should not be updated, and this jives with Clarence Thomas's view of the law as well. Originalists confound me, but whatever. We knew that this was the type of judge that, I mean, honestly, of the trio of Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, I honestly think that she is kind of like the paragon, like the ideal Federalist Society judge, which I think is interesting. But the last thing I want to say about Amy Coney Barrett is she is a member of a group called People of Praise, a religious group. Some, sort of resistance types on Twitter and such have said that this is the group that inspired The Handmaid's Tale. That is actually not the case, and I think this is important because we're going to talk about the upcoming confirmation battle and what that's going to look like, and but this is Amy Coney Barrett is not Brett Kavanaugh. I do not think there is a very credible assault allegation around the corner. Judge Barrett honestly is, when I say the ideal Federalist Society judge, I mean, Democrats should not fall into this trap of attacking her personally.
Right. Because
she is one of 7 children. Her family was in New Orleans for generations, father, great-grandfather, whole family going to the same all-girls private school. She's got 7 children. 2 of them were adopted from Haiti. She really is not the person you want to get dragged into this battle for, especially when Republicans are chomping at the bit for anything.
Right.
Anything at all that you might say to be considered, oh, well, Democrats don't want her on the bench because she's Catholic.
Right.
Joe Biden's Catholic, okay?
Yeah.
This is, anybody that, like, actually pays attention to this stuff knows that this is absurd. It's just that Senate Republicans are counting on the idea that people don't know about this, and they can say, oh, I'm Catholic, I'm Christian, my friends are religious, and I don't like the way they're treating this woman solely because of her religion. This fight has to be framed on for two things. I think it is crucial because this has now become one of the now 3 big issues for the election. It's COVID, it's racial inequity, and now it is the Supreme Court seat. Because everybody should have known this was a possibility.
Right.
Everybody should have known that there's probably 2 seats that the next president should nominate.
Right.
But be that as it may, this is now a defining 2020 presidential election issue.
Yeah.
So 2 ways to frame it. 1, stolen seat. Republican hypocrisy. I get that doesn't always hold because Republicans are consistently hypocritical, to like ad nauseum.
To their core.
Yes, yeah. Like you have a clip of Lindsey Graham begging for his own words to be used against him. Literally asking for his own words to be used against him. Not like figure of speech, like asking, please use my own words against me. And now, well, that didn't count.
Yeah.
Okay. Hope Jamie Harrison kicks your ass. Thanks, Lindsey. But, okay. So, like I was saying, 2 ways. Stolen seat. So, this is going all the way back to Merrick Garland. Honestly, all 3 of Trump's nominations are kind of suspect. You have one that should have been President Obama's. You have Anthony Kennedy, not trying to besmirch the name of Judge Kennedy, but stepping down under suspicious circumstances. I'm not going to get into anything, but still. And now we have a seat, while the election is going on. People are casting ballots for the 2020 election, and Republicans have now changed their tune. So that's number 1. And I think number 2 is the even more important way to frame this is the Senate GOP has sat on their hands for months, not providing you, the average American citizen, with COVID-19 relief. No more stimulus checks, no more expanded unemployment benefits, nothing. And even after months and months of inaction on that, suddenly a Supreme Court seat opens up, and this is their number 1 priority. And you see, when Mitch McConnell wants to mobilize, how quickly he can do it.
Right.
So I think that is the one that Joe Biden really needs to run with. I think that the Senate Judiciary Committee and, who knows, they're going to boycott the hearings, what's going to happen, whatever. They can get that message of it's a stolen seat. I think that Joe Biden needs to be focusing on, hey, look at these Senate Republicans. Joe Biden and, for that matter, Sarah Gideon, John Ossoff, Jamie Harrison, John Hickenlooper, any of these Democrats trying to flip the Senate needs to be, look at my opponent. They are not caring about helping you and your family during this time of need, helping to make sure your family's healthy, helping to make sure your family is taken care of financially. But the second a Supreme Court seat opens up, suddenly they're able to do things. Suddenly we are reminded the Senate does actually exist because you would be forgiven thinking that it didn't exist anymore with Mitch McConnell's inaction on any number of issues. So.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. It would be ineffective to attack her personally. Look, me and you both went to Catholic school.
We did.
These are not evil people.
Yeah.
Everyone that I had in administrative staff was, for the most part, a wonderful person. This isn't about her being Catholic.
Right.
I will say that these people aren't in touch with reality a lot of times.
Sometimes.
So it needs to be focused on policy.
Yeah. And that's an understandable personal reaction.
Right.
It's just, we don't want Joe Biden, who is a Catholic, I don't think is going to fall for this trap. No. But, Marco Rubio's out here saying, they're attacking Catholicism. Ilhan Omar actually had a really funny response to this, because Marco Rubio went on Twitter and is like, they're attacking Catholicism now. What religion is next? The Ilhan Omar kind of quote tweet, and it was like, who wants to tell them? because Republicans have kind of made a career in a post 9/11 America attacking people's religion. But
right. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I've seen some people worry about like gay rights. I don't think at this point they would like overturn gay marriage.
The thing I think that people need to understand about the court, and the reason that the Affordable Care Act and abortion rights are the most pressing issues, is that the Supreme Court does not legislate, right?
Right.
Like, literally does not legislate. You know, you hear phrases like legislate from the bench, but they do not draft legislation.
Right.
So they need to hear a case to change policy in the United States. Just so happens that they are going to hear a case about the Affordable Care Act the week after the election, as we mentioned, and abortion rights cases are kind of always a threat.
Yeah.
Because Republican state legislatures, Republican states, anti-abortion areas are constantly passing laws that are in violation of Roe v. Wade. And then, you know, now when you have a conservative supermajority, well, now you have the organizations like the ACLU in an impossible spot, right? Because typically, if we had a court that was very clearly going to uphold precedent and know that Roe v. Wade and the modifications that were made to it in Planned Parenthood v. Casey is established precedent, and they would respect stare decisis and all that, the ACLU would challenge this policy, and that would be that, because the policy does not jive with Roe.
Right.
The problem now is when the ACLU challenges that policy, if it gets repealed all the way to the Supreme Court, then the court can overturn that precedent in Roe and effectively outlaw abortion. So, you know, I think it's going to be harder to challenge something like gay marriage, same-sex marriage. But, you know, I think that Roe and the ACA are very pressing.
Right.
And it's very right to be alarmed.
That people have been worried about. You know, so if Democrats were to boycott these hearings, do you think that has any effect? I gotta say, I don't. I mean, Amy Barrett, I mean, in my eyes, she's going to be on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I don't think anything Democrats can do is actually going to prove to be effective in getting her to not be on the seat. What do you think? Right.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think the boycotting strategy is kind of messy. I understand in principle the idea to treat it like an illegitimate nomination because it's an illegitimate nomination.
Right.
But I don't think, with how complicit the media sometimes can be, I hate that phrase, the media, but I still use it, I'm sorry, you know, can be in these situations. I think the story gets framed like, Democrats are doing this, Democrats are doing that, and then, you know, we have that whole mess. And I think that maybe Senate Democrats in a confirmation hearing can perhaps effectively get across the message that, you know, calling this process a sham, calling it illegitimate, is not an attack on Amy Coney Barrett personally,
right?
But more so everything that's gone into this nomination.
Yeah.
So I think that using that time could be valuable,
right,
in a way that you really don't get that chance. You know, because if every question from our ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee on the Democratic side is, you know, I'm just wondering, you, Judge Barrett, or, you know, why do you think this is appropriate? Because she has comments before saying, you know, that it wouldn't be appropriate for President Obama to nominate Merrick Garland for Scalia's seat.
Right.
I think that might be an effective use of messaging, but like you were saying, it's hard to imagine that Judge Barrett doesn't get confirmed. I mean, the Senate is 53-47 Republican.
Yeah.
It's technically 53-45 too because of Bernie Sanders and Angus King, but they caucus with the Democrats, so don't get me on semantics here. But they got the votes. They got the votes, and this is how Mitch McConnell runs things in his Senate.
Right.
So I think it's more productive to talk about what comes next should she be confirmed, which we think she probably will be.
Yeah. And that being said, let's move on to the fight ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people. I know they're toying with the idea of Supreme Court expansion, expanding the number of seats. I mean, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I don't think that's something that they can push right now.
No. Yeah. Let's add that in this fight to come. Anything that you see Democratic commentators on YouTube talking about, whether they're genuine leftists, whether they're liberal, sort of blue check prominent commentators that get 500,000 retweets on every tweet about politics. Any of these changes are contingent on Joe Biden winning the White House and Democrats retaking the Senate.
Right.
Both of which, if you believe polling, should be attainable.
Right.
So, Joe Biden consistently leads in national polls, which don't matter at all. But he also consistently leads in battleground state polls, which are the ones that actually matter. If you take all the data we have, Joe Biden is leading currently. And I will add that I believe that Mitch McConnell has very clearly shown his hand that he does not believe Donald Trump will win in November. I think very clearly, because this is a losing issue for them.
Right.
They, get Mitch from the Pod Save guys, raised millions upon millions of dollars in the days following the passing of Justice Ginsburg. Millions upon millions of dollars. The polling is clear. Some polls show 10 points, some polls show 40 points that American voters are opposed to nominating somebody before the election. So that is a losing issue for them. I think that Mitch McConnell is probably looking at everything and thinking that, if we get a Supreme Court seat and Democrats don't do anything to the Supreme Court, that it's worth the risk. It's worth the price of admission. But we'll see. So, a lot of the Senate forecast models show Democrats being slightly favored to take back control of the Senate right now. Right. You have races like Hickenloopers, which feel pretty safe. Knock on wood, nothing is safe. Nobody is guaranteed to win any kind of election. But you have the Hickenloopers. You have Mark Kelly in Arizona. You have Sarah Gideon running against Susan Collins.
I even think Montana's Senate race is kind of close
Bullock.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Montana's, they have been red for, forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so this is you have a few that I feel like give you the tie. Yeah. That feels like, this is solid. This looks like this is where it's going. And of course, if Joe Biden were to win the White House, Vice President Kamala Harris would break any ties in the Senate as Vice President. Yeah. And you have races like Jamie Harrison, where he's in South Carolina, and it seems like a long shot, but suddenly the polls show him tied with Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey Graham is crying on Tucker Carlson about how he's getting outfunded $100 million to 1, and it's awesome hearing that. And Jamie Harrison is doing a great job fundraising and hopefully funding this fight. So you have a number. You have John Ossoff in Georgia, which Georgia's purple, and like you mentioned, the documentary, Georgia's voter suppression is very well documented. Yeah. So you have Ossoff running, and you have Cal Cunningham in North Carolina taking on Tom Hillis. So you have a number of viable options to take back the Senate. So that was a very rambly way of saying that is what is necessary to implement any of these changes.
Right. We can win. There's a very good chance that we can win. The only thing that stands in our way is that Republicans just cheat.
Yeah.
And they're so good at it.
Yeah. Republicans don't want people to vote. Like that's kind of, whatever your feelings about the Democratic Party and ineffectiveness in governance, I always feel more comfortable being on the side with the politicians that want people to vote.
Right.
Like, Republicans do not want people to vote.
Right. I'm pretty sure America, who is supposed to be the figurehead of democracy, we are ranked last in our voting mechanisms, and we're the lowest ranked democracy in the world, and we're supposed to be the figureheads.
It's a sham. It's a sham. It's very undemocratic. The Electoral College is sort of rigged towards Republicans as it currently sits. I think that's why Beto O'Rourke is fighting so hard for, Texas to really be in play this election. Yeah. Again, depending on what commentators you follow about how optimistic they are, who knows if that's a realistic possibility, but the only way we actually get rid of the Electoral College is to win Texas. Because when Texas turns blue, Republicans are introducing legislation to kill the Electoral College. Because they're never winning another federal election that way. But what's their option, right? Because they're not winning it by popular vote, that's for sure. So yeah, these races are winnable, and depending on how this confirmation battle plays out, they might have just became more winnable. Honestly, because like I was saying, the polling shows that this move is going to be incredibly unpopular politically. It is a losing issue. And not only is the actual act of replacing Justice Ginsburg, 40 days, even less as the confirmation process goes on, out from the election unpopular, the Affordable Care Act is incredibly popular. We saw this. We saw Republicans lose on this issue in the 2018 midterms. They got smacked. Democrats took back the House because Republicans were trying to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. So that is a losing issue for them. And Roe v. Wade is...
especially in the middle of a pandemic.
and Roe v. Wade is a losing issue for them as well. And suburban women is not a block of voters that Trump wants to lose more of, and that Republicans want to lose more of, and they will if they go forward with this, which they are going to. So it's really a question of whether Democrats can take back the Senate, take back the White House, in which they would be control of all three chambers of government, and kind of employ this McConnell-esque strategy of, I don't care when the other guys are in charge, burn it to the ground. Because this is breaking the Senate. This is really putting on display, I think, the disparities in which representation is divided in the Senate. Obviously we have the House of Representatives as well, but I think that more and more people are, kind of coming to a consensus that they don't like that California has the same amount of representatives in a governing body as Wyoming. So, and this isn't a debate on the merits of the Senate, but I'm just saying, like, this is, we're really, I think, entering uncharted waters here. Another tactic that Democrats are using is saying that, ending the filibuster and
I was about to say that.
Providing statehood for DC and Puerto Rico. Let me just say this on this issue, because there's not a lot to say about that. It's obviously getting more representation for people who are Americans, who should be represented in government more than they are. And that get the very short end of the stick because of that lack of representation. But when we talk about this issue, and this was, made clear to me a little while ago, we should not be saying we are forcing DC and Puerto Rico to become states. I think that is incredibly problematic, because what we should be saying is we will provide the votes necessary to allow Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico to determine their own fate as to
Right.
whether or not they would like to become states in the Union.
Right.
Because we should not just be like, yeah, Puerto Rico's a state now because we said so, because McConnell
Right.
confirmed a justice in a sham process. Like, that's not okay, and that's discounting, it's kind of throwing out the idea that you actually want to give Puerto Ricans representation in government. It's more like you just want to use them as a political chess piece. So that's all I have to say about that.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, those are popular opinions in those places, right? They want to, for the most part, they want to become states.
I think that that's just a language thing of like getting people on board by saying,
And I mean, if that's the case, Republicans will never win another election.
Oh, they're
DC. I mean,
you'll have 4 more Democratic senators.
Right. DC is a very large. It has a very big black population. This is why Mitch McConnell doesn't want them to be states.
Right. Yeah. Of course.
If it was a bunch of white evangelicals, he would be fighting for it right off the bat.
Yeah. I can't remember who said it. Somebody tweeted it. I can't remember if it was a reporter, but they said along the lines. It might have been Matt Fuller from HuffPost. But they said along the lines of like, if Mitch McConnell thought that Washington, D.C. would give Republicans 2 more Senate seats, it would be a state yesterday.
Right, exactly.
So that's the thing. Circling back to court expansion.
Yeah.
The Constitution provides for the necessity of a Supreme Court. It does not provide a minimum/maximum number of justices. It has been up to 10, actually. In the past, but the 9-justice precedent that we currently find ourselves in was actually set during the Grant administration in 1868. That is Ulysses S. Grant. So been a little while since we had 9.
Yeah.
So this is a potential thing that Democrats could do. I don't know what it looks like before we're just, we have 50 justices on the bench 5 elections from now, and that's that. But I've heard talk of adding 2 justices. Pete Buttigieg had a plan for Supreme Court reform, where I believe this could be off, but I believe his idea was allowing Senate Democrats to choose 5 justices, allowing Senate Republicans to choose 5 justices, and then those 10 justices voting on 5 more. Who knows what that looks like? But that was Pete's idea. So it has been before brought up because of what happened in 2016 as like some kind of court reform to kind of bring back the illusion of a lack of partisanship in the Supreme Court, because that is not there anymore, and American voters don't have faith in the institution anymore, and we need to restore that.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, that wouldn't be an issue, but that those just aren't the times we're living in.
Yeah, and the other thing that gets thrown around is term limits, which you throw out term limits for anyone involved in any way of government, and most voters are into it. The problem with term limits for congressional representatives, of course, is they're the ones voting on it. So it's unlikely. It's hard to say. I've seen conflicting opinions on whether or not implementing term limits for Supreme Court justices would require a constitutional amendment. So that is a debate, and that would continue to be a debate if that became a popular idea. Should things go well for Democrats in November. But I think that Chuck Schumer has kind of been very forward with the idea that all of this is on the table. So we'll see. And the other thing about term limits I was going to say is I don't know what happens to the justices currently on the bench. Whether they're given now a period. I saw term limits, and also each president adds 2 new justices no matter what. So there is a whole lot of ideas flying around. But again, coming back to what we're talking about, framing this issue, I don't know if we even should be talking about that right now.
Yeah,
like, I mean, it's, you know, I think just focus on the fact that they're ramming through a justice, and
right.
you know, I think that modifying the Supreme Court in such a, you know, monumental way, it begs, you know, considerate deliberation.
Yeah.
And it requires, you know, genuine hard thought to what to do next.
Right.
So
so let's move on. So we want to end on the legacy of RBG, and just her career in general. Again, just a superhero.
Yeah.
Like that's the only way to describe her. I mean, she's been fighting the good fight her entire career, which is, you know, you can't say that about a lot of these people.
No, and it's a career that started when it was, let's just say, unpopular.
Right.
For a woman to be fighting that fight in her profession.
Right. I mean, she was, I don't remember the exact number, but one of, like, I don't know the number, but like 5 or some crazy.
I think it's 6.
6, at Harvard, like one of 6 women in Harvard that graduated Harvard Law. Watch the RBG documentary on Hulu. It's amazing.
It's actually, if you don't have Hulu, they uploaded it to YouTube.
Nice. So
you can watch that, you know, completely for free.
Right.
Watch that. You know, I'll kind of dive into it. For people, you know, I think that I see a lot on Twitter, you know, and I think that to some people that are more cynical about the process, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is kind of just somebody that got stitched on a lot of Etsy products, and that people make too big a deal of her, you know, turning her into this icon. You're entitled to your opinion. If you ask me personally, I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it's her impact on law is absurd. It's sort of an unparalleled legal career. You know, I wrote a tribute to Justice Ginsburg, and I said entire libraries could be filled with the career achievements of Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah.
And actually, before I jump into her career real quick, I just want to add her relationship with her husband Marty.
Oh my God.
It was a lovely marriage.
Yeah.
And a lot has been made about the fact that had Marty Ginsburg not been a sort of forward-thinking fella,
right,
and known and respected his wife's work, and knew that the work that she was doing for the women's movement was so important, and, you know, he hadn't been willing to set aside his career for her goals as she advanced, we might not have these things, and we might not have the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So I just think that they had a lovely relationship, and I think that Ruth would have wanted, you know, when you mention Ruth, that a mention of Marty is not far behind.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to plug that. But her career, I mean, she argued 6 cases in front of the court. She was the co-founder of the ACLU's Women's Rights Project. So she argued 6 cases in front of the court. She had a 5-1 record, close to Michael Jordan-esque. Almost had the 6-0. So when you think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, think of somebody who dominated her lane in the way that Michael Jordan did. So one of my favorite cases that she argued is Frontiero v. Richardson. So Frontiero was a case about spousal benefits to military service members' partners, and policy dictated that the benefits were inherently given to wives of male military service members, because it was assumed that the male military service member was the one doing the heavy lifting financially, and supporting his helpless wife.
Right.
And this was not the case for female military service members. So, you know, Ruth argued against that, and she took what many have described as kind of a Thurgood Marshall-esque strategy, similar to the strategy Thurgood Marshall took in attacking segregation in schools, kind of chipping away at the existing precedent so that by the time she was finished, gender-based discrimination really did not have a legal basis to stand on, which I think is brilliant and so forward-thinking. She was only the second woman to be elevated to the bench, first being Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. She was confirmed, ain't this funny, 93-6. I don't think, no offense to Judge Barrett, that you're going to see those kinds of numbers at her confirmation hearing. You don't really see that anymore, but 93-6, it was, kind of this slam dunk nomination at a time in which, funnily enough, Senator Joe Biden was a ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. But yeah, it's funny you hear stories about her nomination, which came from President Bill Clinton, and Ruth kind of wasn't on President Clinton's radar as much. She was an older justice, right? At the time,
she was in like her 60s, right?
At the time of the nominating, and Marty kind of went to bat for her and became kind of her agent, which is really cool. And then Bill Clinton has kind of talked about the fact that when she met with him, it really wasn't going to be somebody else.
No.
Like he blew her away, which it makes sense. So the two other cases I want to mention come from her time as a Supreme Court justice. So one of the most iconic Ruth Bader Ginsburg cases is United States versus Virginia, because United States versus Virginia was really the first gender discrimination case that the court heard when Ruth was on the bench. So she basically, United States versus Virginia had to do with the Virginia Military Institute's male-only admissions policy. And that policy was struck down by the court. Fun fact about that case, Clarence Thomas did not vote in that case because his son was affiliated with Virginia Military Institute. So there you go. It's your useless fact of the day. But she gave the majority opinion in U.S. v. Virginia, kind of stating that there was no constitutional basis in which Virginia Military Institute's male-only admissions policy could stand. And there's Shelby County v. Holder, which is one of her iconic dissents. And this is kind of where, if you watch this documentary, they'll get into the fact that this is kind of where she became the notorious RBG and kind of the dissenter in chief,
right,
for a more conservative court, when Justice Kennedy was the swing justice, but was a conservative justice. And she's a fabulous writer. So Shelby dealt with the congressional renewal of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and whether that exceeded congressional authority. This was the case that, when you hear Democratic politicians talking about the gutted Voting Rights Act, you hear people like John Ossoff calls for it a bunch, Charles Booker, who was a candidate in the Senate primary in Kentucky, talk about the need for a new Voting Rights Act, because Shelby gutted the Voting Rights Act, essentially said, the South has done their time and they no longer need approval to make changes to voting policy, which was a bad idea. But I just want to read this quote and then we can kind of wrap up here. But this quote from Justice Ginsburg's dissent in Shelby: throwing out preclearance when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. I love snippy Supreme Court opinions, right. And Ruth is just one of a kind. So, she had a fabulous, fascinating career. I implore you, if you're just now hearing about her or you knew who she was, and there's a very helpful website called oyez.org. That's oyez.org. And you can basically listen to oral arguments of Supreme Court cases, which is awesome. I highly, highly recommend it. And yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to a former professor of mine, Linda Wharton. When I was at Stockton University, she taught a couple law classes that I took. And I can't think of a better person to bring Justice Ginsburg's fight to life for me than Professor Wharton. So I just want to
should have had her on for an interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we sure wouldn't be where we are as a country without her.
Yeah. It's I think, in kind of wrapping up our thoughts on this, because of the way we think of politics now and politicians in this kind of cynical way, I think it's hard for a lot of people to fathom that one person could have had the kind of impact that Justice Ginsburg had. But she's kind of a testament to the idea that you can make a difference if you get involved in the process, and if you fight for the things you care for. And I think that is, above all else, the message that Justice Ginsburg would like to resonate after her passing, is that, you are not powerless in this system. And a lot of us are a lot more privileged and a lot more well set up to take on fights like these than Ruth was when she began to take them on. Right. And she still won. Right. She did nothing but win. So, I think that's, it's easy to feel despair, but I think that we should also feel inspiration, and fight like hell. Yeah. Fight like hell in her honor.
Yeah, because it should not have come down to just her.
Yeah. It's absurd to think about the idea that policy as, sort of popular as the Affordable Care Act and the right to an abortion in the United States of America can be thrown out the window at the death of one person. That's a systemic problem. Right. Which is why I think it's good that Democrats are already thinking about shaking up the system a little bit. Again, we talked about whether it's viable or not to talk about it right now, but it should be at the forefront of every Democratic politician's mind, because the fact of the matter is, if you don't do anything, then, what are we going to do when the Green New Deal gets passed by a Democratic House, Senate, and signed by a Democratic president, and then it's challenged in court and, it's deemed unconstitutional. Yeah. And what are we going to do? I mean, if we're talking about the Affordable Care Act getting repealed, how in the hell are we going to get Medicare for all if we don't do anything, or any kind of universal health care for that matter, if we don't do anything about where the court sits. Yeah. And, again, we promised not to attack Judge Amy Coney Barrett personally. I don't think she deserves it. No. But I do find it, a little disheartening that a judge that should have, the utmost respect for the body in which she's been nominated for, would accept this nomination. Yeah. And wouldn't, say, I can't accept this nomination until you're confirmed to be president of the United States again and you're reelected. Right. It's, when you think about it in regular terms, I get it. People don't typically turn down their shot for their dream job. And I'm sure that Judge Barrett knows that should she say that President Trump will turn around and be like, okay, call up Josh Hawley, because I know he'll take the he'll take the call and he'll take the seat. So I understand probably she's thinking that wouldn't do any good anyway. Right. But it is a little, disheartening that this is where we are. Yeah.
Well, on that note, Ruth, we love you. Stay tuned next week. we will be talking about the debate.
Yep. First presidential debate coming up.
Yeah, gotta say, I'm kind of excited to watch it.
Yeah.
I really don't know what to expect. I kind of know what to expect. Curious to see how Biden will handle it.
Yeah.
Trump's going to have, he's going to have his comedy routine, and we'll see if Biden's prepared to, take it.
Yeah, and next week we're going to be talking about the debate, and I think almost of equal importance, maybe even more important, is the story of the debate and how it's being framed. Did Biden stumble on a couple words and that's being used as evidence against him that, he has dementia,
right?
All these kind of unfair smears on him that kind of never get lobbied at the president.
Right.
So, whether journalists are, really pulling the weight in framing this story, I think is going to be of equal importance, because that's, more Americans are going to read about how the debate went than watch the debate, right? So,
yeah. Is it a town hall, or is that one of the future debates? Because I think one of the debates is a town hall.
I believe it's future debate.
Okay.
This one is moderated by Chris Wallace of Fox News. There is a list of topics that they're going to be discussing that's already out. Notably absent is climate, which I know a lot of people are very disappointed about, especially because I remember that being a huge issue in Democratic primaries. Not talking nearly enough about the climate disaster. The West Coast has been engulfed in flames, and we're still, not deeming this as an important enough topic to talk about in the first presidential debate. It should have its own segment in every debate up until the election. But so those topics are out there. I couldn't tell you all of them off the top of my head, but they'll be important to look at prior to the debate and see how each candidate responds.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Appreciate it.